Each year, my family and I go to the mountains to cut a tree down for Christmas. I live in a small town in the mountains, so it's a short walk to go get one, and it brings me more of a seasonal vibe by getting a fresh, real tree, unlike those plastic ones. I was told from my parents that I would have to go get a tree by myself this year, as everyone else was busy last-minute shopping and whatnot. I grabbed my chainsaw and my handgun, just in case there were cougars or something like that. I got in my truck and headed down this road for a few miles just outside of town. There was a ton of trees, and some of them were the perfect height for the house. I hiked in for a few minutes and found this tree that would suffice. Just as I was about to crank up the chainsaw, I heard some police sirens in the distance. It sounded like they were flying right by me. Eventually, they faded out of the distance. I fired up the chainsaw and got cutting. I'm a fairly strong man, so I planned on just carrying the tree out. I never really stopped to notice how peaceful it was just being out here by myself. There wasn't any noise other than a squirrel climbing a tree and the wind howl. It was quiet. It almost felt too quiet. The sun was starting to go down, and I wanted to get back to the truck before then. I grabbed my chainsaw off the ground and swung the tree over my shoulders. It was heavy, but I knew I could carry it at least to the truck. As I made my way down the mountain, I followed my own footsteps when I was trekking in. No one ever comes out this far, so my footprints were the only ones out here. Halfway down, and I was still good carrying the chainsaw and tree. The silence was still soothing, my breath mixed with the crunchy sound of the snow as I walked. I felt grateful for where I lived. That feeling didn't last long, as when I was walking, I thought I heard the faint sound of a footstep close by. I stopped in my tracks and listened for any noises in the distance. And then, the sudden feeling of being alone with someone in the mountains hit me as I heard another footstep step over a twig as if someone was hiding. I stood so still, even with all the heavy weight on my person. I know for a fact that someone was hiding in the trees near me. But why? There's nothing out here but snow and trees. I started to feel sick to my stomach, and the weight of the chainsaw and tree started to sink in. I dropped them to the floor and called out to whoever was hiding, telling them to come out. I heard nothing other than my heavy breathing. I didn't think anyone would believe me, so I pulled out my phone and started to record. I walked around and tried to find whoever was hiding, but didn't want to wander too far from my path. Being scared was a gentle way of saying I was pissing my pants. Being alone in the near dark with some stranger in the mountains seemed to have shaken me to the core. I looked and waited for another 15 minutes, but there was nothing. I decided to walk back to the tree and chainsaw, and just as I was about to pick them up, I suddenly heard footsteps rushing towards me as if they were running at me. Screw this, I said. I left the chainsaw and tree and started running down the mountain. I was expecting to hear footsteps chasing me in return, but instead, I heard the cranking of a chainsaw motor starting. I looked behind me and saw some man running towards me with a chainsaw waving it around. I was literally fearing for my life. Full of adrenaline, I ran as fast as I could, and it wasn't until now that I remembered I was carrying my handgun on me. I pulled it out and turned around and fired a shot in his direction. He dropped the chainsaw and ran off into the trees. I didn't care about getting a tree anymore, and took that opportunity to run towards the truck. When I got there, I slammed the door shut behind me, locked the doors, and started the truck while throwing it in drive. I floored it all the way home, not looking behind me. When I got back, my family was also back, wondering where I'd been this whole time. I told them what happened and what I saw. They looked at me in horror as I told them that some guy was stalking me and tried to kill me with the chainsaw that I brought. My dad called the police and told them what happened. They said they would send out a search party in that location and would keep us updated. Later that night, I didn't get much sleep, as you would figure. The next day, I got a phone call from the local police, and they said they caught the man. His name was Samuel Bunner, and he was wanted for murder of a family in my town the same day I ran into him. That must be why he was in the mountains with me. He was running from the police, which explains why I heard the sirens that day. I gag each time I think about if he succeeded in catching me. Who knows what he would have done.